The night was silent, but the silence was not peaceful. The wind moved like a slow whisper over the barren ground, carrying dust and sorrow with it. Far from the glowing cities of the alien world, there was a place no one wanted to see. It was a pit deep and rough, dug into the dirt where broken women were left to die. They were not warriors, not mothers, not chosen by their society. They were the forgotten ones, thrown away like ashes. In that pit lay one young alien woman, her body weak, her face pale, her voice almost gone. She had begged them not to bury her, not because she wanted to live, but because she wanted them to know the truth. "I am not breeding material," she had cried, her words trembling. "I am useless. I cannot give you life. Just bury me here and end this shame." But her people had no mercy. They only turned their backs and left her in the dirt. The soil was cold around her, heavy on her chest. The stars above looked like cruel eyes watching her final breath. She tried to close her eyes, to welcome the darkness, but her body still clung to life. Her throat burned from thirst, her stomach ached with hunger, and her heart was heavy with despair. Every sound of the night echoed in her ears, distant creatures calling, the rumble of storms in the horizon. But then came another sound, a sound that was not of nature. It was footsteps, slow, steady, drawing closer to the pit. At first she thought it was her people returning to mock her. She tried to turn her head, but her strength was fading. A shadow fell over her body, tall and strange, not like the others. It was a human, dressed in worn clothes, his face hidden. In the dim light, he looked down at her with sharp eyes, not cruel, not mocking, but filled with something she could not name. The human had been walking the wasteland, searching for old metals and scraps left by travelers. But instead of rusted machines, he found her, half buried in the ground like forgotten treasure. For a moment he froze, not knowing if she was alive or dead. Then he saw her lips move, weak, trembling, trying to form words. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Leave me here, please. I am nothing, not worth saving." The human knelt beside her, brushing away the dirt from her face. Her skin was pale blue, marked with faint, glowing lines, a beauty even in her brokenness. He could see her eyes filled with pain, yet still shining with a spark. He had heard stories of these women thrown away by their kind, labeled as cursed. The locals feared them, saying they carried bad luck. But the human did not believe in curses. He only believed in life. He placed his hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. Her body flinched. She was not used to kindness. Again she whispered, "Please bury me. Do not waste your hands on me. I am nothing." The human shook his head, his voice strong. "No, you are not nothing." His words cut through the silence like fire in the dark. He pulled more dirt from around her, lifting her body slowly. She was light, fragile like dry branches, her head falling against his chest. Her heart beat weakly, but it still beat. The human could feel it, and it gave him strength. He carried her out of the pit, step by step, his boots pressing into the dirt. The night wind rose, and the stars above looked less cruel now. The alien girl tried to resist, weak hands pushing against him. Her voice cracked again. Why do you save me, when my own people cast me out?" The human did not answer at once, his eyes scanning the empty land. He finally said, "Because no one deserves to die in the dirt." His words shook her. She had never heard such a thing. In her world, worth was measured by what you could give, by the children you could bear. But here was a man, a stranger from another world, saying her life itself had value. Her eyes filled with tears she did not expect. For the first time, she felt something she had long forgotten, a small flame deep inside her chest. It was not hope, not yet, but it was close. The human carried her away from the pit of shame, his steps steady. Behind them, the shallow grave lay silent, empty, but the night itself seemed to breathe differently. The story of death had not ended there, it had just begun. The human walked carefully through the wasteland, the alien girl weak in his arms. Her body felt light but heavy with despair, every breath shallow, every word broken. She whispered again and again, "Leave me. I am cursed. I am not worth your strength." But he did not stop, his arms steady, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had carried broken machines before. Heavy scrap from the ruins, but never a living soul who asked him to bury her. The wasteland around them stretched like an endless sea of dirt, broken stones, and cracked bones of old trees. The stars above were sharp and cold, staring down like judges. The human shelter was far, a small cave hidden between cliffs, a place he had turned into a home of scraps and fire. Every step he took was a choice. Every breath was a decision. Should he save her, knowing she might not want saving, or should he listen to her words and let her return to the earth? When they reached the cave, he laid her gently on a blanket made from old cloth. A small fire burned in the center, giving warmth to the cold night. She turned her face away from the light, ashamed, her glowing lines faint on her skin. He placed water beside her lips. Holding her head carefully, she tried to refuse, shaking her head, whispering, "No, waste not, I am nothing." But the human's hand was firm, and he tipped the water slowly until drops touched her dry mouth. Her body betrayed her, drinking, greedily, tears sliding down her cheeks as she realized she still wanted to live. The human sat near the fire, watching her, his mind heavy with thought. He was a wanderer, a collector, a man who lived by finding and fixing. He had never planned to carry another's life into his cave, especially not one abandoned by her own people. But as he looked at her, fragile yet alive, he felt something rise inside him, something he could not name. It was not pity. It was not duty. It was something stronger. The alien girl, weak but still proud, whispered again, "You do not understand. My people cast me away because I cannot bear life. I am not breeding material. I am broken, useless." Her voice cracked, filled with shame. The human leaned forward, his eyes burning in the firelight. "I do not care what they call you. You are alive, and that is enough." His words were simple, but they carried weight. She looked at him with wide eyes, as if the idea of being enough just by existing was something she had never heard. The cave grew silent, only the crackle of fire filled the air. Outside, the wind howled like a ghost. The human offered her food, a small piece of dried root he had collected earlier. She hesitated, then took it with trembling hands, chewing slowly, her eyes filled with confusion, as if every bite was a crime. "Why do you give this to me?" she asked, her voice thin. "Why not keep it for yourself?" The human's answer was calm. "Because you need it more than I do." Her chest tightened, her heart aching with feelings she did not understand. Her people had never given her kindness, never offered food unless she was tested, never spoken words of value unless she could prove worth. Now this stranger gave without demand, without condition. She turned her face away, tears rolling down silently. The human pretended not to see, but deep inside, he felt her walls beginning to crack. As the night stretched on, danger stirred outside. The human knew patrols sometimes moved. Through these lands, searching for escaped women, he looked at her, lying fragile by the fire, and he felt the weight of choice heavier than ever. If he kept her, he risked hunters finding them both, branding him a traitor. If he left her outside, she would surely die before dawn. The fire flickered, shadows dancing on the walls, and in those shadows he made his choice. He spoke softly, but his voice carried strength. "You will stay here tonight. No one will harm you while I breathe." She opened her mouth to protest, but her voice caught in her throat. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her, not as a tool, not as a test, but as a life worth guarding. Her heart beat faster, her hands trembling as she pulled the blanket closer. She could not understand him, this human, who gave value where none was measured. But her body, tired and broken, began to trust the warmth. The human sat by the cave's entrance, watching. The dark horizon. He had made his choice, a dangerous one, but he would not turn back behind him. The alien girl closed her eyes, still whispering to herself, "Not worth it, not worth it." But her voice was softer now, weaker, like the words were losing power. Sleep pulled her into its arms, the fire's glow painting her face in gentle light. The pit of shame was far behind, and though fear still clung to her heart, something else had begun to grow in the silence. It was not yet hope, Not yet faith, but the first step toward it. And as the human watched the stars outside, he knew this was only the beginning. The morning came slow, light creeping into the cave like shy fingers. The fire was almost gone, leaving behind smoke and ash. The alien girl woke to the sound of water dripping from the rocks, her body stiff, her mind still caught between dreams and pain. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she turned her head and saw the human sitting near the entrance, sharpening a small blade against stone. His back was straight, his eyes alert. Like a guardian waiting for danger to come, she pulled the blanket tighter around herself, shame rising again. Her people had always told her she was weak, a failure, not worthy of food or shelter. Now here she was, wrapped in a stranger's cloth, alive because he refused to bury her. Her throat tightened, her heart pulling between gratitude and guilt. "Why?" she whispered, though her voice cracked. "Why do you not leave me like the others?" The human glanced at her, his eyes steady. "Because the others were wrong," he answered, his words firm but gentle. Her lips trembled, and she looked away, staring into the ashes of the fire. The ashes reminded her of her past, all the tests, all the nights of tears, all the voices calling her useless. She thought of her mother's silence, her father's turn back, the council's cold eyes. Everything burned inside her chest like the ashes on the ground. Slowly, the girl began to speak, her voice weak, but carrying years of pain. She told him about her people's cruel tradition, how every young woman was tested, measured, forced to prove she could carry life. Those who failed were cast aside, thrown into pits, buried in shame so no one would remember them. "I was one of them," she said, her hands shaking. "I failed. They said my blood was thin, my body empty. They said I was nothing." The human listened quietly, his blade forgotten in his hands. His jaw tightened, his heart burning with anger. He had seen many harsh things in his travels. Wars over land, fights over food, betrayals between friends. But this was different. This was cruelty wrapped in law, and it made his blood boil. "You are not nothing," he said again, his voice strong enough to echo against the cave walls. The alien girl shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't understand. In my world, a woman's worth is in her womb. If she cannot give children, she is ash, her name erased, her family cursed." Her words were heavy, carrying centuries of tradition that crushed hearts like stones. She pressed her hands against her face, whispering, "I begged them to bury me because I believed them. I believed I was ash." The human moved closer, his shadow falling over her trembling body. He reached out and gently pulled her hands away from her face. Her eyes were red, wet with sorrow, but behind them was a faint light, a spark still alive. "You are not ash," he said slowly, his words cutting through her despair. "You are fire. You are still burning. You are alive. And that means you are more than they will ever see." Her heart skipped, her chest tightening as she looked at him. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever lifted her higher than the dirt. For a moment, she felt something she had never dared to feel. It was not only hope, it was the thought that maybe, just maybe, her life could mean something beyond their cruel judgment. The human stood walking toward the mouth of the cave. Outside, the land stretched wide, broken but alive, the horizon glowing with a faint sun. He spoke without turning back, his voice carrying through the cool air. "I've seen machines left in rust, and I've fixed them. I've seen weapons bent and broken, and I've made them whole again. You are not more broken than them. You only need someone to believe you can be whole." The alien girl's tears fell harder, her chest shaking. She remembered the pit, the cold soil pressing against her, the voices telling her to accept death. And now this human, this stranger from another world, was telling her she was not broken. The fire inside her chest grew, small but real, pushing against the ashes of her past. For the rest of the morning she sat close to the fire, watching the human as he worked with metal scraps, shaping tools with steady hands, his patience, his strength, his silence. All of it felt strange to her. Her people had only ever given commands or punishments, but this man gave space. He gave time. He gave care. And though she still whispered to herself that she was worthless, the words began to lose their power. Every glance from him, every act of kindness, made the ashes of her past crumble. When the night came again, the girl lay near the fire, staring at the roof of the cave. Her mind replayed her story, her failures, her shame. But this time, another thought pushed through, a question she had never asked before. What if she was not Ash? What if her story was not meant to end in the dirt? As sleep slowly closed her eyes, she touched her chest where her heart still beat. The pit of shame was far behind, but its shadows still clung to her. Yet in those shadows, a new light had begun to grow, small, fragile but alive. And with every breath she felt that light fight against the ashes of her past. The cave had become more than a hiding place. It was slowly turning into something like a home. The human worked with his hands from morning until night, shaping scraps of metal into tools, weaving broken cloth into blankets and building shelves from fallen wood. The alien girl watched him quietly, still weak, but no longer only a shadow of despair. Every action he took was simple, but in her eyes it was strange, even magical. He did not demand. He did not punish, he only created. And in his creating he gave her a new picture of life. One evening he showed her how to hold a stick and spark it against stone. At first her hands trembled, her strikes weak, but he guided her slowly, his larger hand steadying hers. A small flame flickered to life, and she gasped as it caught the dry grass. Her eyes widened with childlike wonder, and for the first time she laughed, the sound soft but real. The human smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet joy. "See," he said, his voice calm. "You can make fire too." She held her hands over the flame, warmth touching her fingers. The memory of the pit returned to her, the soil pressing cold against her skin. But this fire pushed it away. Her heart trembled, realizing she was no longer just waiting for death. She was learning to live. Still fear clung to her, whispering that it could not last, that hunters from her people would find her. Every night, she woke to the sound of footsteps in her dreams, the fear of being dragged back, buried again. The human noticed her restless nights, her sudden gasps when shadows moved. He placed extra wood near the fire, keeping it bright so the darkness would not swallow her. When she shivered, he offered his coat, worn and patched, but warm enough to calm her shaking. "Why do you give me all this?" she asked one night, her voice breaking. "I told you, I am not worth this trouble." The human looked at her, his eyes steady like the earth. "Because I decided you are worth it," he answered simply. Those words pierced her deeper than the cold ever had. Her people had measured her value with tests, numbers, and judgments, but this man's measure was his choice. It was strange, frightening, and yet it filled her with a quiet strength she could not explain. During the days, she tried to help him in small ways. She carried water from the dripping rocks, gathered dry roots, and folded cloth neatly. At first, she thought he would mock her efforts, but instead he nodded with approval. "You make this place better," he said, and her chest tightened at the praise. Her hands shook when she remembered the council calling her useless, but his words made her hands feel steady again. One afternoon, the sound of distant voices carried through the cliffs. The human froze, pulling her quickly deeper into the cave, his hand over her mouth to keep her quiet. Torches flickered outside, shadows moving across the rocks. Hunters, searching, their voices sharp and cruel, speaking the words she had heard before. "Find the useless ones. Find the ash women. Make sure none escape." Her heart pounded, her body trembling as the voices grew closer. Tears burned her eyes as memories of the pit returned. But this time she was not alone. The human's grip was firm, his eyes calm even in the danger. He whispered softly, "Stay still, trust me." She pressed against him, her breath shaking, listening as the footsteps passed. For endless minutes they hid in silence, until finally the voices faded into the distance. Only then did she collapse, against his chest, her sobs muffled by his coat. "They will come again," she whispered. "They will not stop, they will find me." The human stroked her hair gently, his voice strong. "Then I will stop them." The words were bold, dangerous, but she felt them settle in her heart like stone. For the first time, she began to believe she might not face the hunters alone. The shelter was not just walls of rock and fire. It was protection. It was promise. And in that promise, hope began to take root, fragile but alive. As days passed, the alien girl's body grew stronger, her steps steadier, her eyes brighter, her laughter returning in small pieces. She still whispered sometimes that she was not enough. But the human always answered, "You are enough," he said again and again, until the words began to feel real. At night she sat by the fire, touching her chest where her heart beat, feeling it stronger with each passing day. The pit of shame was behind her, and though fear still lived in her veins, it no longer owned her. The human watched her closely, seeing the change. He knew danger was near, that hunters might return, but he also knew something greater was happening. She was not the same broken figure he had pulled from the dirt. She was rising step by step into someone new. And as he watched her smile softly by the firelight, he knew the shelter they built was more than a cave. It was the shelter of hope. And hope was the most dangerous thing of all. The nights grew, heavier, the air thick with danger. Every time the wind shifted, the human could hear voices far in the distance, hunters moving through the wasteland. The alien girl sensed them too, her body stiff whenever the faint glow of torches appeared. On the horizon, she knew those men, she knew their merciless eyes, their cruel laughter, the way they dragged broken women back to the pits. She had escaped death once, but she feared she would not escape again. The human kept the fire smaller now, only glowing embers at night. He taught her how to move silently, how to listen to the ground for footsteps. They shared few words during those nights, their voices carried only in whispers. Her heart pounded each time he said, "Quiet, they are close." The cave that once felt safe now seemed too small, too fragile to keep out the world. One evening, the hunters drew nearer than before. Their voices rolled like thunder through the rocks, cruel laughter echoing. The alien girl pressed against the cave wall, shaking, her hands covering her ears. Memories of her burial returned, the soil crushing her chest, the cries of others fading in the dark. She whispered, "They will take me. They will kill you." The human crouched beside her, his voice steady as stone. "No, they will not. Not while I breathe." He guided her deeper into a narrow tunnel inside the cave, a hidden crack in the stone. There, they waited in the dark, the sound of footsteps growing louder, closer. She could see faint torchlight bleeding into the cave entrance, the shadows long and sharp, her breath caught in her throat, her hands clutching the human's arm. For endless moments, they listened, as the hunters searched, voices cursing, boots striking stone. Then slowly the light faded, the voices moved away, leaving silence behind. Her knees gave out and she collapsed against him, sobs shaking her chest. The human held her close, whispering words that steadied her. "They will keep coming," she said, her voice broken. "They will not stop until they find me. Then we will keep moving," he answered, his eyes fixed on the shadows. "We will stay ahead of them." From that night, the cave was no longer enough. The human prepared supplies, water skins, dried roots, sharp stones. Tied to sticks, he gave her a small blade, rough but strong. Placing it gently in her hand, she shook her head, whispering, "I cannot fight." "You can," he said firmly, "and I will teach you." Days turned into restless nights, their journey pulling them through broken valleys and silent forests of stone. The hunters' voices haunted the wind, sometimes near, sometimes far, but always present. Every step carried tension, every pause a decision between safety and risk. The alien girl learned to move quickly, to hide under rocks, to hold her breath when danger passed. Her fear was still there, but beside it grew something new: trust. One night, as they crossed a ridge, torches suddenly flared behind them. The hunters had found their trail, voices shouting, boots striking fast against stone. The alien girl froze, panic gripping her, but the human grabbed her hand, pulling her forward. "Run!" he commanded, and they ran, hearts pounding, shadows chasing. The cliffs echoed with the hunter's cries, arrows clattering against rocks. She stumbled, nearly falling, but the human caught her, lifting her when her legs failed. Every breath was fire in her chest, every step a battle, but she clung to him, refusing to let go. At last they found another cave high in the ridge, crawling inside just as the torches swept past below. The human pressed his back against the stone, holding her close to silence her sobs. Sweat covered his face, his chest heaving, but his eyes still sharp. "They are getting closer," she whispered, her body trembling. "Yes," he admitted, his voice low. "But they will not take you. Not as long as I stand." Her heart twisted, not only in fear, but in something deeper. Every time he risked himself for her, every time he carried her through the dark, she felt her walls breaking. No one had ever fought for her, no one had ever chosen her. She looked at him with wide eyes, tears shining, and whispered, "Why do you keep saving me?" The human met her gaze, his answer steady, "Because your life matters more than you believe." Her chest shook, the words sinking into places she had long buried under shame. She touched his hand, trembling, her voice soft. "I was left to die, but with you, I feel alive." For a moment, the fear of the hunt faded, replaced by the warmth between them. The fire of hope flickered brighter, stronger than the shadows that chased them. Outside, the hunters searched, their voices echoing in the night. But inside the cave, the alien girl leaned against the human, her eyes closing. She knew the danger was not over. The hunt would continue. Yet for the first time, she did not only feel fear, she felt strength. Because she was no longer running alone, she was no longer a shadow of shame. She was someone worth saving, someone worth fighting for. And as the night stretched on, she held on to that truth. No matter how close the hunters came, she would not go back to the pit, not while he was with her. The days turned into weeks, and the endless running slowed only when the hunters' voices faded far behind. The human and the alien girl found shelter in a hidden valley, a place where green plants still grew around a broken stream. For the first time since she had left the pit, the alien girl felt her chest loosen, her steps no longer heavy with only fear. Yet inside her heart, confusion began to grow, confusion that soon turned into something more. Her body felt strange, her stomach twisting, her chest tight, her breath unsteady. At first she thought it was sickness, a curse sent by her people to finish what they had started. One night she doubled over in pain, clutching her sides, her glowing lines pulsing brighter than usual. The human rushed to her, his hands steady, his eyes sharp. "What is it?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with worry. She shook her head, tears falling. "It is nothing, I am cursed, I told you I am broken." The human did not accept her words, he never did. He checked her carefully, his hands firm yet gentle, listening to her breath, feeling her pulse. Then he paused, his eyes widening as he touched her stomach. Her body trembled under his hand, her breath quickening. "What is it?" she asked, fear sharp in her voice. The human looked at her with disbelief, then wonder. "You are not sick," he whispered slowly. "You are carrying life." Her eyes went wide, her voice breaking into a cry. No, that cannot be. They told me I was empty. They told me I could never carry, I am ash, I am nothing." Her whole body shook, her heart racing, memories of the council's harsh words burning in her mind. The human gripped her shoulders firmly, his voice strong. "They lied to you. You are not empty. You are not ash. You are a mother." The words fell on her like thunder, shaking every part of her. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing, her tears falling onto his chest. Her mind fought against the truth, but her body betrayed her with the rhythm of new life inside. Every beat of her heart now echoed with another, small and fragile but real. She whispered through her tears, "It cannot be. It cannot be." But the human held her close, repeating, "It is. It is." The nights after that were filled with silence and thought. The alien girl lay awake, her hands resting over her stomach, her mind racing between fear and wonder. She remembered the pit, the dirt pressing down, her begging for death, her belief that she was useless. And now, here she was, carrying life where none was supposed to grow. It felt like a miracle, but miracles were something she had never believed in. The human treated her with even greater care. He gave her the best of the food they found. He made softer bedding from grass and cloth. He watched her closely when she grew tired. When she stumbled, he caught her. When she cried, he listened. When she doubted, he reminded her, "You are not broken," he said. "You are the proof that their cruelty was wrong." Slowly, her fear began to turn into something else, something fragile but bright. Every time she felt a change inside her, she realized the truth more and more. She was not useless. She was not ash. She was not cursed. She was alive, and inside her was another life, small but full of promise. One night, as they sat by the fire in the hidden valley, she placed her hand on his, pressing it against her stomach. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only of pain. "Do you feel it?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "There is something there, something alive." The human's eyes softened, his rough hand steady on her skin. "Yes," he said quietly. "I feel it, and it is beautiful." Her heart broke again, but this time it broke open, not closed. The weight of years of shame began to fall away piece by piece. She thought of the council, of the voices that had condemned her, and for the first time, their power over her faded. She thought of the pit and realized it no longer defined her. She touched her stomach again and whispered to herself, "I am not ash." The human watched her, his eyes filled with something deeper than care. He had saved many broken things in his life, machines, tools, even wounded animals. But saving her felt different, because she was not just surviving. Now she was transforming. And in her transformation, he felt himself changing too. As the fire burned low and the stars stretched across the night, the alien girl leaned against him. Her fear had not vanished. Danger still lurked. The hunters might still return. But in her heart, a new strength had taken root. She no longer wished for burial, no longer begged for death. She now wanted to live, not only for herself, but for the life inside her. It was a miracle she never thought possible, a miracle born from a stranger's choice. And as she closed her eyes beside the human, she whispered a promise. "I will not go back to the pit. I will not be ash again." The valley was quiet, the stream moving like a silver thread under the pale moon. The alien girl sat near the water, her hands resting gently on her stomach, her eyes wide with thought. Each day her body changed. Each day the truth grew stronger. She was not broken. She was carrying life. The memory of the pit still haunted her, the weight of the soil, the voices calling her ash. But here, in this hidden valley, another memory was being born. One filled with warmth and breath and hope. The human returned from his search, arms heavy with roots and wild fruits, his face glowing faintly with sweat. When he saw her sitting there, her head tilted toward the stars, he paused. Something in her posture was different, no longer the posture of a broken woman waiting for death. She was upright, steady, her glowing lines bright against the night. For a moment, he only watched her, his chest heavy with quiet pride. She turned when he stepped closer, her lips trembling with a smile. "I feel it," she whispered, her voice soft but strong. "There is life inside me. I feel it moving. I feel it growing." The human knelt beside her, setting down the food, his hand resting on hers, his rough fingers steady, her fragile fingers trembling. Together they felt the miracle beneath her skin. His voice carried like a vow. "This life will never be taken from you, not while I stand." Tears filled her eyes, but they were no longer tears of despair. She remembered the words she once begged. "Bury me here. I am not breeding material. I am nothing. Now those words felt like smoke, burned away by the fire of the present. She placed her forehead against his chest, whispering, "You gave me more than life. You gave me myself." The human's arms wrapped around her, strong and steady. For the first time in her existence, she felt safe, not because she was hidden, but because she was chosen. Days passed, and the hunters never returned to the valley. Maybe they believed she had died. Maybe the land itself had hidden her. Whatever the reason, silence filled their nights, silence that gave space for healing. The human taught her more: how to build small traps for fish, how to sharpen stones into tools, how to read the signs of the wind. She learned with eagerness, each skill another step away from the ashes of her past. One evening, as the fire flickered low, she asked him a question that had lived inside her for weeks. "What will happen when the child is born? Will you stay with me? Will you leave?" Her voice shook, though she tried to sound strong. The human looked at her, his eyes steady as ever, and answered, "I will not leave. I will be here with you, with the child for as long as I breathe." The words washed over her like sunlight, chasing away the last shadows of doubt. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Then I am not alone anymore." The stars stretched across the night, endless and bright. She stared at them, her hand on her stomach, and realized her story had changed. She was no longer the woman cast aside, no longer the one begging for burial. She was a mother. She was alive, and she was loved. The miracle inside her was proof that her people had been wrong, that life had chosen her even when they had not. When the first rays of dawn broke over the valley, painting the cliffs with gold, she stood at the stream. The human came beside her, silent, his presence steady as the earth. She turned to him, her eyes shining with tears that glowed like her skin. "I once begged for the dirt to take me," she whispered, "but now I beg for life, for tomorrow, for all the days that will come." Her words carried into the morning air, like a prayer to the universe. The human took her hand, their fingers locking together. In that moment, the pit of shame was far behind them, only a shadow of what once was. Before them stretched a new road, uncertain but alive. She touched her stomach gently, her lips forming words she had never dared to believe. "This is my family now," she said, looking at the human with trembling eyes. "You, me, and the child." The human's gaze softened, his rough voice steady. "Yes, your family, our family." The sound of those words filled her like light. Erasing the last chains of her people's cruelty, she leaned against him as the sun rose higher, her heart no longer heavy with shame. She had once begged to be buried, but now she wanted only to live. And in that valley, under the dawn sky, the alien girl found what her world had denied her. Not only life, not only love, but a future. A new dawn had come, and with it she was reborn.